Okay, this is probably one of the most important videos I'm going to make. I'm going to pull a lot of pieces together and hopefully help people shape something that's been missing in their understanding. What I'm noticing, unfortunately, is a lot of people that come on the page now that I've never seen before are all coming in with their prejudices and biases because they've put their life force energy into it, and therefore the ego now is attached to these ideas that they hold now as truths. One of them is that, laws can be written down, and that's what makes it legitimate. They're always asking, where's this written? They don't understand that laws can't be written. All you can write is legislation, and legislation cannot be law because it's temporary. Government cannot create the permanent because it's not the creator of life itself. If you can understand that principle, maybe you can move forward with this knowledge that's going to be imparted here. If you're still struggling because your ego is overactive, this is going to be a real struggle for you to even want to listen to the rest of this. So, as I assume, maybe I'm happy to be proven otherwise. So the other thing is that, so many people come in correcting, oh, you're not driving, you're traveling, all this kind of stuff, ecclesiastical law, that somehow that can enhance your rights. Like, that's the most absurd thing. You either have rights or you don't. You can't enhance that which is already there. It is in existence or it isn't. By writing it down, all that means is someone seeks to control your rights in a very, very insidious way that actually gets you to believe that they're there for your protection of your rights. Your rights are something you understand intuitively in your gut, and you know when they're breached and when they're not. And then there's a method by which that can be handled when they aren't. When there's been a breach of it. And the whole thing about the language, you've got to watch your language. Well, what are you doing, right? If you're sovereign, if you're truly sovereign, you decide what the words mean as you understand them from the time you were raised as a child. You don't start taking on the legalese, fake, illegitimate version and start granting it authority like it actually has any. It doesn't. It's a mind trick structure, right? So why would you even bother, having arguments with people over that? When you understand where the true nature of authority is, you'll never even bring that up, because the first thing you'll do is always challenge those who seek to harm you or transgress against you on their authority. That's as far as you need to go. And if you haven't understood it yet, there's only one place where that actually agreed to, how we're going to live in the system of governance, and that's the Magna Carta 1215. All you people who come out and say things like, well, it's null and void because the king, it was done at knife point, he was forced, do you know what I mean? He signed under duress, all this kind of stuff. I've covered that, right? You can go back into the lessons that I've done, all the video posts, it's all there. It's not true. Because then if you believe that, you believe a criminal is not bound to come and stand before the people for the crimes they've committed, because that's what King John was. So you got to decide which one is it. Are you going to live in contradiction or not? And the other thing, it was never signed, it was sealed. If it was signed, it would be a contract. And that would mean that the people would have to sign it as the other co-signees, right? So people don't understand what constitutions are when they say it had to be signed. You can't sign a constitution. A constitution is a promise of how one is going to deliver services if they're going to be holding a grant of authority over the people. Very few people understand that. So these are basic principles very few people understand, and they keep coming in with their biases and prejudices and thinking they're right, and thinking they can go into Supreme Courts and tear down the entire structure using the mafia to do it. Like, really, have a proper think about that. So this is going to go a lot longer than I'd like, but it's actually critical, because there's information here that if I break it up, it'll break the momentum and the rhythm and the energy flow. So it's just, if you're going to watch this, just be prepared for a long one, guys, because that's what's going to have to be. I'm not happy about it, but there's no other way I can think to do it where it's going to have full value. So now I'm going to play this clip from Michael Desarion, and we're going to really start digging into the true nature of the laws that exist in nature, so you can start having a bit more of an understanding of how this all works. That's if you're here to learn. If you're here to propagate your own beliefs and confirm your biases, it's probably not going to have that much value for you other than something to argue against or with.
What's that experience? What's what happens to a person that who's evil and ruthless and negative? Just observe it. And you'll notice that this is in fact a case. And it's certainly the case up the fractal. Evil contains within it the seed of its own destruction. The moment that you take that kind of anti-human negative stance, you're just waving a red flag to nature, go come and get me, which is exactly what's happening now. It's called the age of revealing and the age of awakening.
So anyone who's really taken note of why I do what I do, it's to raise your spiritual and conscious awareness. That's it. That's all that's required, is once you understand your spirit is attuned to its true divine self, you will know exactly what to do. And that's what he's saying here, right? And that's the only reason I do it. I don't do it to be right or, prove myself better or smarter or anything like that. It's just give you knowledge. Whether you're ready to accept it or not, that's your choice. No one can make you do it. But at the same time, you need to take responsibility for your refusal of the knowledge and the consequences that come with that. And those that refuse knowledge are totally oblivious to that's even a thing. So that's the real tragedy. So we're going to listen on.
It's a physical war, but it's also a psychic one. And the guidance that comes to you is the most important thing, and it will show you where to go and what to do about it. And that kind of particular guidance I'm talking about is not the same kind of sorcery that the Black Lodge has. They have high intelligence, and they have tremendous human knowledge about us on the most fundamental levels. But they lack that connection to the higher intelligence. And that's their ultimate downfall, together with what I said about evil having the seeds of destruction within it. You choose that road, and you will be terminal. You choose the organic, living, feminine, flow of the Tao. And no matter what tyrannies exist in the world, no matter how things get bleak, even if things get 10 times as bleak as they are, not worse, like a prison planet, really and truly, as long as you're with that flow, you're in your center. And it doesn't matter, you see. So it's all about where you are. And they can't inhabit that place, which is why they want dominion, right, over the world. If you can't rise yourself, what's the next best thing? Push everybody down. You're actually remaining exactly where you are, but you've done a good job, like the teachers and bastards we have to deal with every day. They're going to, push you down, and then they feel mighty high. Well, that's what the Bushes and Obamas and the Stalins and all do. They cannot rise themselves, and we have to understand this. They're static spiritually. And the moment that you start doing your spiritual homework, the moment that you do your spiritual homework, you are then on the road to victory.
So there you have it, guys. That's truly what it's about. It's about you having the courage to go and do your spiritual homework. Look in deep to your own contradictions that you've accepted. All those people who jump on the page and start commenting about their biases and prejudices, this is about you facing those contradictions, right? And very few people have the courage to do it. Yet you're willing to actually shove it down other people's throat, who don't agree with you. So this is the true nature of spiritual homework. You are being controlled to be in contradiction with yourself. That is why I put this knowledge out here, so you can see how it's done, how you're controlled to act against your own true divine intelligence. Right? He's even said it there. There's a dark priest class that exists that knows this material really well and how to manipulate it and use it to their advantage to get you to believe that you are making choices from free will when you are not. You're being manipulated into them. So we're going to go in and take a look at some more stuff to do with that, so we can really start piecing it together. So I'm just going to be right back in a second. We're about to listen to Will now. He's going to explain it again over and over. The tragic part here is that no matter how many times the evidence is shown to you, when you're not ready to hear and see the truth as it is, this is going to be meaningless to you. And most people, unfortunately, need to discover it the hard way. They have to go and find out all the ways things are not before they're willing to see how it is. So what I'm seeing is far too many people are still stuck in that journey where they need to bang their head against the wall for longer. But if you're not one of those, if you're one of those few, and I know you exist because every so often you will come and comment on the page about the spiritual enlightenment you're getting from this content, well, then this is going to be a value for you.
To be honest, they are playing on our weaknesses.
Right.
Yeah, and this is, and I promise you, this is about psychological manipulation. Okay, and you probably know that, but it's all about behaviour nudging. Brian Gerrish has talked about this on UK Column very eloquently in the past. He's excellent on this. It's all about psychological nudging and shifting the behaviour of people within society and changing their perceptions. Yes. And really, the people, people say to me, well, who is this right at the very top? And of course, we don't really know. It gets a bit shady, all that stuff, right at the very top. But what we do know for certain is that when you look into the dark, ancient history, into esoteric information about who these people are behind the scenes, really what they are is dark, ancient psychologists. And that's what they're good at. They're actually very good at psychological manipulation.
Yes.
That's ultimately what it is. They take advantage by changing our behaviours and then swooping in and taking advantage of that and gradually, incrementally taking control.
Yes.
Because we've weakened ourselves, essentially. And that's why it's really important that when you embrace your constitution, you understand and learn about natural law and some of the deeper principles that underpin it, because it does go into subjects like how we relate to the universe. What is the behavior of man at the psychological and emotional level? You know, and I'm not suggesting that everybody's going to get involved in this, but people who really grasp this constitutional stuff. I was at a talk last night down here, and my goodness, at the end, we just went on and on chatting at the end, because some of these people really got it. They understood that this is a much bigger issue, this.
So if you're one of those people who's listening to this and you are grasping it, you know, you've come and put those comments on that said, you know, that there's been a spiritual awakening inside you because of the actual knowledge that's been shared. You are one of these in the smaller category, right? The ones who really get it. Well, that's now a calling for you too, to start acting on it. Now, there's bulk of the people, like as I said here, they're going to be at that surface level. That's the best that they can access, right? But there is a very strong number of you, I know you exist out there, who really get this stuff. And you are the ones who are capable of making the change for all the others that can only handle it at the surface level. So we need to all start uniting, guys. That's what this material is for. It's for you guys.
You know, so yes, we can deal with the light stuff. And there are things that we can do, and we can change our behaviors and all the rest of it. But actually, some of you who are interested in this and realize the profound nature of it, you need to go deeper into this and study natural law as well and esoteric information, because it's all about our psychology as well and how we can be manipulated.
So there you have it, guys. This is why this is critical. This is why I do it. It's because to show you how you're being controlled. Now, there's only a small number of you can really understand it to the depth that's required. And the way that that gets confirmed to me is the comments I see coming back after I put in tons of hours of collecting resources together to make a 10-minute video. And then the responses I get for the majority are just things that are about their biases that they want to talk about, nothing else. Like the content that's in there is so rich, and all I get is one little aspect that's only to do with what's important to them, right? Those people aren't ready yet. But there are those of you who probably don't even comment, right, that are ready for this. And so this is your next step. Whether you're ready to take it or not, that's up to you. So we're going to go get some more stuff out as well while we're putting all this together. Okay, so now we're going to look at David Wilcock, some of the things that he's got to say. You'll see there's a lot of overlap here. So regardless of what your personal opinion is, what I'm sharing is the overlap in information that's saying the same thing over and over again from different sources. So there you can see if it's coming from different sources, right? Maybe there's something of value here. That's the only reason I'm sharing it, not because of who's saying it. Here we go.
So what do I mean when I'm talking about the cabal? One of the names that many people are familiar with would be the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the New World Order, the Illuminati. What are we really talking about here? Ultimately, we are talking about organized crime. We are talking about crime syndicates that work on a quasi-governmental level because they do not take any of their high-ranking people and actually run them for office. The people who run for office are never more than middle level within these corporations. We have multiple insiders, whistleblowers, some of whom I've spoken to directly, who have witnessed American presidents acting like simpering little wimps in front of these higher-ranking cabal members because they are terrified of them. This cabal has at its core, believe it or not, a Luciferian belief system. One of the things that I learned from whistleblowers from the cabal itself.
So just going to pause it there before he goes on. Is now you heard Will saying that there's a class of people that we don't get to see, right? That hide in the shadows, that we will never know who they are, right? Now he's just saying the same thing, right? And these governments are all part of their corporation, right? They're just stooges, the mid-level stooges that are there to serve a purpose. So very much in alignment with, if you've looked at the stuff I've done before, all the video posts from 100 onwards shows how, or some even before that actually, in the 90s too, in the high 90s, I show the police are a corporation. I show how the Australian government's a corporation, right? It's all overlapping here, right? So you can see it's all coming together, guys. That's what this is there for. So you can see more and more information, repeating the same stuff, all right? Can it really be, a coincidence? Or is there something to it? That's what is it for you to decide, right?
Is that they have to work within something they call the rules. And this is very, very important. So I really want to make sure that this gets into the film. The rules are a body of spiritual principles that they must follow in order to be allowed to exist.
That's really important, guys. This is understanding of natural law. He's starting to get into it now. Okay, remember if you've watched the videos that I made earlier when I show you about natural law, there's two aspects. There's the deterministic and the random, right? The deterministic has two parts. One is about the laws of nature, so the actual material world, right? And then there's the actual laws that are governing the spiritual realm, right? And that's the morality. Okay, so the alchemy that is going to be mentioned later is when the spiritual realm combines with the material realm. That's the true nature of alchemy. And you're going to hear that in the next video when you hear that word alchemy. So I'm just setting it up now. But this is all part of it. This is the whole influence of the material world from the spiritual world, right? That's what's really been explained here. And that's why they have to get into your mind, because what your mind does, your body follows. See, that's the spiritual world affecting the material world. If you can understand that link, this is going to mean something to you.
What do I mean by allowed to exist? I mean that they are aware that there are benevolent forces that will prevent them from achieving their goals unless we give them permission to enslave us. Now think about that. Well, I didn't give them permission. Why, for example, was there a document on display in the British Museum Library of London in the late 1800s that comprehensively lays out a plan for 3 world wars, during which time they will consolidate a Luciferian New World Order? And those 3 world wars are precise descriptions of World War I, World War II, and a third war in which they believed that most of the major countries have been eliminated and consolidated, and the only group left is going to be rogue mercenaries, which we would now call terrorists. They didn't use that word, but it totally describes Gulf War I, Gulf War II, the war on terrorism. That's World War III, because the rules state that they have to tell us what they're doing. Therefore, if we allow it to happen, we have consented to tyranny, we have consented to enslavement.
I'm just going to leave it there because it's going to go on about a lot of other stuff. It's relevant, but not specific to what I want to achieve today. So I might, if I get enough interest, I might make this entire video public on the page. So I'll see what comments and responses I get back. Now I'm going to move to an actual quote from Aldous Huxley, and you'll see, hopefully, how all that predictive programming we're going to look at in a moment is really falling into place, so you can see how people are controlled. Okay, so this has come from stuff that just drops in my feed. It's quite amazing. It's like the universe is handing me stuff so I can put it together. So the perfect dictatorship, this is an Aldous Huxley quote. Now remember, he was an insider. Would have the appearance of democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream of escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where through consumption and entertainment. Now that's critical, guys, entertainment, because I'm going to show another video in a second about what the true nature of entertainment is. The slaves would love their servitude. Now I'm going to show you another snippet that came with this quote in my feed that talks about some history, a bit of a quick biography of Aldous Huxley. And yeah, you might find it quite interesting. Well, let's have a quick read of this. This is from As Above, So Below, I think it's called. Yeah, As Above, So Below. If you want to look him up on Facebook. Aldous Huxley was a famous novelist from England who lived between July 26, 1894. Now, think about the book that George Orwell wrote. It was called 1984. It's a switch of 2 numbers. Quite fascinating. I wonder if there's a link there. Who's to know? And November 22, 1963, Aldous Leonard Huxley was an English writer who, in retrospect, is best known for the dystopian future satire Brave New World from 1932. So remember, they're always going to tell you, and you'll see in the video that I'm about to show you, they're always going to tell you what's coming. So they need to have a way to, transmute that information so people can actually be programmed into accepting it, right? They've got to get you ready. They've got to soften up the terrain. He moved to the US in 1937 to escape the anticipated war. It's so funny how he anticipated that. And lived in Los Angeles until his death in 1963. He wrote in most genres, novels, short series, poems, travelogues, essays, prose, and screenplay. So he covered a lot of categories, right? In the interwar period, he wrote cynical fable about modern psychology and science had broken down traditional values and led to rootlessness among the intellectuals. He's telling you right there what was going to come, because a lot of our issues come from the intellectual class. They are a big part of this whole problem that we've been living in for centuries. From the late 20th century, he writes of large ethical seriousness and affected by his interest in mysticism and parapsychology. Very important. He's got an interest in mysticism and parapsychology. Please note that. Very, very important. So let's move on to the next video that's going to explain this within more depth. So I'm going to stop this part way through when all the writing comes up, because if I don't read that part, you're going to miss some really critical information. So first I'm going to play it, and then when I get to the writing, I'm going to stop it and speak about it and actually read it out.
In the movie Knowing, the news reported a major oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico.
Tonight in the Gulf of Mexico, an explosion on the soon-to-be decommissioned oil rig triggered a fire which burned for 3 hours before it was extinguished. Officials don't yet know the exact cause of the explosion, but believe a malfunction in the cooling system may have been at fault. Due to the prompt response of the rescue unit, the structure was evacuated with no loss of life.
A year later, the Deepwater Horizon exploded. 6 months before 9/11, a lone gunman episode showed us the World Trade Center being targeted by a hijacked passenger plane.
Corner of Liberty and Washington. Lower Manhattan.
World Trade Center. We're going to crash the plane into the World Trade Center. And last year's film, White Noise, was about a train wreck that poisons a small town in Ohio. This is the very same story now playing out in real life. Within a year of White Noise's release, the actual event occurs in real life, in Ohio, in Texas, and in Michigan. This is known as predictive programming, and its purpose is to psychologically trick the minds of the masses.
All right, so just remember it said psychologically trick the minds of the masses. I want to grab this because he's not going to read all of it, and it's really important that that I read this part now. So it says, I can't see the top of it, says program and the Apollo moon flights, more serious attention and respectability was accorded, and it says science fiction, nonetheless in its formative seeding time from the late 19th century. So you're going to see a lot of things happen in the late 19th century through the 1950s, and predictive program known as science fiction. That's the purpose of entertainment, guys. That's always been its purpose. And what did Aldous Huxley say in that quote I just said about what the masses require to stay in the confines of their prison that they can't see the walls of? They require comfort and entertainment, and then they will love their servitude. Had the advantage of being derided as the solitary vice of misfit juveniles and marginal adults. So that's how they presented it, right? If you're a misfit, you're not going to be taken seriously. Like, you're going to be seen as someone who's got a chip on their shoulder. So whatever you believe in, right, whatever things you attach to, they have no real significance in people who see reality properly, right? That whole idea that there's some people who see reality better than others according to big groups, not as an individual, right? It's groups of people. They can see reality better than others. So when you're what's the word I'm after? Not confined, but identified. There's a better word I'm looking for right now, and I can't think of it. It starts with C. Categorized. That's it. When you're categorized into a group, then only then can the knowledge that you might hold as an individual get dismissed. That's how it's done. So that's why they did it this way, right? They needed to make it interesting to who? The ones who can see the world in different ways that the masses don't. The cryptocracy has always operated as a rhetorical system. In the Kennedy assassination, we saw this in the command words, Camelot, Storyville, Shakespeare, and the truth or consequences. Predictive programming works by means of the propagation of the illusion of an infallibly accurate vision of how the world is going to look in the future. This fraud has had a not inconsiderable impact on our society. Aleister Crowley, in a statement to OTO, initiates concerning one of his books, describes the underlying epistemology behind the glamour and enchantment, which causes the occult con game to become the weird reality we inhabit in America today. In this book, it is spoken of the Sephiroth and the paths of spirits and conjurations of gods, spheres, planes, and many other things which may not exist. It's hard to read because I've got this line right in the way. It is imperial, I think that says immaterial, I can't really see, whether they exist or not. By doing certain things, certain results follow. Students are, I can't read the next word, earnestly warned against attributing, I think that says, objective reality or philosophic validity at any of them. So now we're going to listen to what he says.
Into accepting major traumatic events that would otherwise be resisted. In the book Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, Michael Hoffman describes a mind control technique known as the revelation of the method. And he writes that...
All right, so I'm going to do some more reading because he won't read the whole thing, and it's really critical info. Now, remember earlier I spoke about alchemy, right? So here comes the meaning. So you can understand alchemy is when the consciousness actually has influence over the material. The alchemy principle of the revelation of the method has at its chief component a clown-like grinning mockery of the victims as a show of power and a macabre arrogance. So guys, you might need to read that again. So slow it down and start again. When this is performed in a veiled manner, so remember everything's about concealed knowledge, accompanied by certain occult signs and symbolic words, and elicits no meaningful response of opposition or resistance from the targets. It is one of the most efficacious techniques of psychological warfare and mind rape. Now, if you've watched the videos I've done before about Victoria Police, for example, and you look at the insignia that they wear the inverted pentagram, right? And I've gone and done a lot of detail about that. It's in video posts in the 80s, guys. So go down to the 80s and you'll see I've broken it down very specifically about all those occultic symbols that are all there, right? And most people are so programmed they don't even look into it, right? So they're doing it. They have to show you in every aspect. So they have it on the ambulances, obviously on the police vehicles, on other emergency services, fire trucks. It's all on every aspect. Every aspect you require for your survival, that occult symbolism is all over it. That shows you just how deep the control runs. Let me read on. This ceremonial nose thumbing, this perverse jesting and clowning is taken to the highest level of intensity by the truth or consequences principle, which ultimately hinges upon the issue of consent. So he's going to go talk about consent in more depth, but I needed to read this because he won't cover it in this video. It is one thing for the media, the police, the judiciary, and the killers themselves to commit terrible acts, right? So they're already complicit in it, right? If you didn't have that knowledge before, hopefully you're starting to get how this all works, right? What their true role is. Commit terrible acts without our knowledge or consent. It is quite another matter with grave repercussions in the realm of psychodrama, public ritual, and advanced mind control when these crimes are committed with our consent. So when police pull you over, right, they are constantly asking you 3 key questions because they've been trained that they must do that before they can proceed with any kind of violence, right? And if they don't get it, then they must understand it as you being belligerent, and then they can proceed with violence, right? So they have a ritual that they've been trained into following, right? It's got nothing to do with the laws of nature as they stand in reality. It's to do with the ancient psychological tradition that's been conjured up by these dark priests, right? That's what they're following without realizing why. And that's why they need certain people with a low IQ who will not question what they're doing in order to have this done. So that's very deliberately profiled for that purpose. Now, I've explained that in previous videos. You can go see it. I think it's in the high 90s. It's all there for you. Now, I said public ritual, right? I've explained that, and advanced mind control. When these crimes are committed in our consent, it is an ancient rule of both the moral and common law that silence connotes, I've never heard that word before, consents silence, and a lack of meaningful action constitute consent in the face of these crimes. Now, when they say common law, I'm going to question that. I'm going to say that that's the common law, that's the legal leave system, right? That old contract law. That's not the true nature of authentic common law, because common law authentically comes from the conscience. It's standing on moral principle. And silence does not grant anyone any authority, right? That's a made-up construct of the mind of criminals, of how they trick themselves into believing that this is consent. That's what all contract law is about. It's about trickery of the mind. Now, I don't know how well I'm going to read the bottom line because it's sort of obscured by what I've got on my screen. The brag to us about what they've gotten away with, or they brag to us about what they've gotten away with, and we're thrilled by it. That's our only significant response. That and the anticipation of the next thrill. So you got to think about what's really said here, guys, right? These guys have got a real sick fantasy that they're living out in their real life worlds that we are being drawn into because of our ignorance. And if we don't actually understand how we're being controlled, then we can never move past those limits. So that's why this knowledge is being put out, so you can understand it. And once you understand it, then you decide what you're going to do about it. And if you decide to do nothing, the karma's on you. That's the point of all this. So let me play it on now.
When the revelation of the method is performed in a veiled manner, accompanied by certain occult signs and symbolic words, and elicits no meaningful response of opposition or resistance from the target, it is one of the most efficacious techniques of psychological warfare and mind rape. Sarah Elkhaldy of the Alchemist YouTube channel does an excellent job of explaining all this. According to Elkhaldy, there is a law of nature in this universe that compels the dark occult to first gain our consent before trespassing against us.
Okay, let me read this. They incorporate predictive programming because it acts as a spiritual consent. They know the laws of the universe, and by programming things in the subconscious mind, especially to a mass amount of people, ends up manifesting it into reality. Right? So what that's saying is that your unconscious mind cannot tell the difference by how it's getting the information. It can't tell the difference between you actually living it in a face-to-face experience or whether it's coming from a screen. It's all information to your unconscious mind. And once that knowledge is there, once that's, it's entered your mind, it cannot leave. It's the same as if someone accuses someone of being a rapist, right? You will never get that term out of your mind after that's been put there. It's the same way. These people understand how it goes. Now, Michael Cesarin, when I played the beginning of this video, he actually says that dark priest class know very well how to use this knowledge in order to manipulate us. And so this is just more detail for you.
Because they believe this protects them from the natural laws of cause and effect. They offered and we accepted, so it's all fair.
So offer and acceptance are generally recognized as essential requirements for the formation of a contract, right? Now, who created this contract? The criminal structure did. And analysis of their operation is a traditional approach in contract law. Now, if you really think about it deeply, right? How many things used to happen in the past, and probably not your generation, but if you're old enough to remember back, where it was just people would act on their word. They didn't need to write anything down. That's the true nature of how we get things done, right? But this criminal structure has created it, like I said, in the 19th century, this way where it's written down and you think that you've got more protection. But really, this is a way to get your silent consent without you even knowing that's a thing. Because they put that out as the way that we go about things now, right? That we need it all written down, etc., yada, yada. It's all part of the trickery. It's just another layer, guys. All right? So all these people who think that contract protects them really don't understand that the only thing that's going to protect you is if we all stand on moral principle. And contract law is the opposition to that. Now, let me read on. The offer and the acceptance formula developed in the 19th century, there we go, 19th century, identifies a moment of formation when the parties are of one mind. That's critical, right? So what they say is if you consent, so when the police use violence to get you to consent, right, in their ritual religion, they see that as one mind. You've unified, so this is what you want. That's the sickness of what's in play here. So it's really important I read this stuff, because if I don't read it, most people will go past it and not see what's there.
A lack of response to an action is often taken as an approval of that action.
So here's an idiom that they created as well, the criminal mindset, a concept of social interaction which states that people tend to assume that the lack of response to an action as tacit approval of that action. So it's all assumption, but it's not actually in reality. You think about how many times you stay silent. Is it because you really agreed with what was happening? Or was there some fear there, where you didn't want to step forward with your actual true, what was true inside you, because the consequences of doing so was going to be worse than staying silent, right? That doesn't get factored into it, right? So we got to start thinking about this in reality as to why people do stay silent, and is it really because they agree, right? That's the difference when you stand on principle as opposed to have someone else define the meaning of words for you. If someone else is there doing that, you are the slave. This is a very, very clever mind trick that gets done. And then people just accept it. Well, that's just true because it's written down, without going into their hearts and go, well, actually, let me actually see what my heart tells me about this. Right? This is really critical information about how to see how this whole structure has been laid over, and very few people have challenged or questioned it.
And there is an old Latin proverb that says, "He who is silent when he ought to have spoken and was able to is taken to agree."
How funny is that? It's a Latin one. So where did the criminal structure really do its best work? Was it not in the Roman Empire? So here they were laying the foundations. The people who can't make the connection that we're still living back in those days, we've just got different mechanisms by which things are done, and our environment looks a little bit different. But the actual root way that people operate hasn't changed one bit.
Silence is considered by many to be a form of consent. And so it is through a veiled performance of the revelation of the method technique that these dark occultists believe they are gaining our consent, what we know as predictive programming. With predictive programming, the minds of the masses are impregnated with visuals of a major event before it happens. This is done through all forms of media and can be very subtle so that nobody notices. But the subconscious mind notices everything and can easily be programmed through.
So there you go. Everything you saw, heard, felt based on the environment and the adults around you molded your subconscious mind, and therefore you just took on all their beliefs. Have a think about that, guys. It's really important you sit with that one. Your environment you are dependent upon for your survival will have the biggest impact on you. And you, for survival, will mold to your environment. That's just how we are. We are that way as we are. At this age, you just did not have the critical faculty to reject anything that did not sit right with you. So quite literally, your limiting thoughts and beliefs are not even yours. So if anyone's ever listened to the work I've done, one of the things I've always said is, show me one who believes they are in charge of their own decisions, and I will show you a very good slave. Well, there it is right there in front of you.
Repetition. And so these controllers repeat whatever it is that they want us to accept as reality.
911.
Because these images are delivered to us through entertainment, they elicit no meaningful response of opposition or resistance. And so we accept them subconsciously. And when the event happens in real life, it is already familiar and acceptable to us, as if that's just the way it is. It's a mind trick, and it works by keeping everyone locked in a spectator state. This causes what is known as paradigm blindness, which is when a person is incapable of seeing any reality other than what they've already been exposed to by the media. This paradigm blindness will cause a person to get emotionally triggered whenever confronted with an alternative point of view that they have not been programmed to accept. It's a very powerful mind trick, and the solution is quite simple. We need to stop living as spectators of someone else's reality. We need to start creating our own reality, and we need to remember how to say no, because they offer it to us and we accept it.
All right. So remember, I read this to you earlier, so I'm not going to read that again. I'm going to show you an actual website where Will has been part of the creation of, that gives you the real simple understanding of how you can take back your control through the knowledge of what a true legitimate system of governance is supposed to actually work like. And these globalists, they hate constitutions that are lawful and legitimate, because that is the only buffer that stops them from actually doing what they want. And they know that. That's why they have to get in there and change it. That's why they came in with their corpus juris, and they got into our lawful systems that way, very underhanded, by creating the Bar Association. They just snuck in under the radar, right? And they got us used to this criminal structure and made us believe that's justice, right? So if you go on this website, you are going to get educated with the true nature of how justice can work and how it was supposed to work, and how actually all tribes across the planet, by and large, would operate on the same principle, because we all intuitively understand this in our hearts. It's just that our egos have been put in a position where our survival has been dependent upon accepting the lie. If we don't accept it, we die. So because of that, our ego now tricks us into believing that what we experience is actually legitimate. So I'm going to bring this website up in a second, and then I'm just going to quickly scroll through it. I'm not going to do the whole thing, and then you can do your own investigations. Well, guys, here's the website where you can start taking your power back and start learning and really understand the true nature of how you are your own master of yourself, because a constitution, a true one, is there for protecting your individual rights. That's all it's there for, right? So it's called commonlawconstitution.org, right? Here we go. There's 5 things to read. Understand what governance is first. Here we go. It says the government decide on what is morally acceptable, right? It's always on principle, right? Then you got, can government do anything it likes? Government create laws and statutes, right? It talks about that. In Britain and also in America, the legislative branch known as the Congress, it's the same structure. The only difference between America and Britain is that America has a president as your head of state, where in Britain they have what's called the monarch. That's the only difference. It runs exactly the same, no difference. And then you've got trial by jury. This is what I've been talking about earlier. You can read on about that, how trial by jury is how we control our own lives by deciding on the limits of what legislation is allowed to do, right? And then it talks about the king and queen, the head of state, and what they're supposed to be, all right? There's a bunch of other stuff on there. I don't want to go too much into it, but that's for you to research in your own time, right? I've shown you where to find it. And those who think that that doesn't belong to them in their countries and stuff, they need to understand there is only one type of constitution. Everything else is a legal invention masquerading as a constitution. If it doesn't have an agreement where it's not a contract that's signed, right? That's not a constitution, but it's a promise of how government is to conduct itself and what it cannot do, right? It doesn't bind the people because we don't sign that. It binds government. So if people who want to get a job in government, they need to adhere to the principles of morality, of universal morality. That's pretty much what that is. So we can be left alone to go about our business uninterfered with by government. And if government ever chooses to interfere with us, then we have a way to correct that and bring them to account. That's what a true constitution would have in it. Now, how many of you who believe in the American Constitution have found where that's written in there? Okay, because you don't actually have one. That was signed by 2 different parties of the same structure, right? You cannot sign a constitution. Like, very few people are going to be able to get their heads around that. Now I'm going to finish on one more short little video, and then that'll do it. Almost done, guys. It's a bit soft, so you're going to have to turn your volume up for this one.
This one's for all the men out there. And by men, I mean those of you who haven't allowed yourself to be emasculated by this society yet. Boys, if you were given the task of sitting down right now and writing out your own obituary, what would it read? I sat by idly, with a heart full of uncertainty and a gut full of fear, as I watched a group of global elite take over the world, destroy everything I knew, and enslave humanity. Or would it read, I was wise enough to see what was coming. I stood up and locked arms with my fellow men from around the world. We stood hard and we stood fast. And we did everything that we had to do to push that evil back, expel it from this world, and make sure that it never had the opportunity to come again to destroy and to enslave. I love each and every one of you. Future humanity is in our hands, boys. Give those words some serious thought.
Okay, so there you have it, guys. You have a choice, right? All I can do is I can lead you to the water. I cannot make you drink. So I've given you the resources from which you can now stand as a man or a woman. Doesn't really matter how you want to phrase it, but just in your divine power. If you don't actually take the action, it doesn't matter what you know. So knowledge is only the potential for power. It's your application of that knowledge. So first, once you find the knowledge, then you need the courage to actually apply it. And that's the difference. That's what's going to make the difference by each and every one of you watching.